Hey guys, Ryan Gill here with Hunt Primitive, where we entertain, educate, and inspire, and we're working really hard to get you where you want to be with your own primitive building and hunting journey. On this channel, we do a lot of primitive builds, how-tos, and hunting videos. This will be a how-to video. If it is your first time to the channel, do please consider subscribing and following along. But hey, what we're going to talk about today is how to identify good rocks for knapping, which knapping is making arrowheads or making knife blades. So I've got a lot of examples here to share with you guys today because I get a ridiculous ton of questions on how do I find knapping rock and what does good knapping rock even look like. And you know what? Sometimes I take this for granted because I've been doing it for so long that I just assume that people just know what good knapping rock looks like, and that's not the case at all. So I've had to kind of reel it back in a little bit and say, hey, let me put this information out so you know what you're looking for when you go out looking for knapping rock in your area. Probably one of the first things that I need to be really upfront about is good knapping rock can be very tough to find. It can be really easy to find if you live in the perfect place, say like Edwards Plateau in Texas. People would say, why would I ever pay for rock, or why would I ever have to wonder, like I just walk in my yard and pick it up. Well, that is the anomaly. Most people don't have rock anywhere in their near vicinity that's actually good for knapping. So like native peoples used to travel great distances and also trade great distances for good sources of rock. So there's even some places, say like North and South Carolina, especially on the eastern side, Virginia, Georgia, all like eastern seaboard, like there's like no rock in that whole area. So they were sourcing even poor rock and bringing it into the area, like quartzite and rhyolite and stuff like that. So there's lots and lots of different places that don't have good rock, and then you have other places that don't have rock everywhere, but they've got little isolated pockets of it. But here, I'm going to go through and I'm going to start showing you a few examples, things to look for, and also things to avoid. So what makes good knapping rock? Well, it comes down to a very, very basic thing to look for. It's something that looks glassy or waxy. Okay, so let's use this as an example. Now this is again another anomaly. Okay, so we're talking about obsidian. Okay, this is volcanic glass. You could look at this immediately and say, this is good for knapping. This doesn't occur anywhere in the East. This is stuff like Oregon, Utah, down into Mexico. It's volcanic glass. So you have to go for areas that either have active volcanoes or extinct volcanoes, but that's where you're going to find it. Not super common. So no, it doesn't exist in this area, but if you've got that stuff, it's phenomenal rock, incredibly sharp. Now, you have other places. I mentioned the Edwards Plateau in Texas before, so this is a good example of that. So this is a type of Edwards Chert, which is a version of paternalis, and you can see it's got a couple inclusions. It's got a couple different colors and stuff in it, and these aren't a big deal, and I knocked this flake already off. So when you find rock, you see how it's glassy and will break really sharp and clean. If you can knock a piece off and it's got a knife edge that can really cut some stuff, that's good rock. Okay, so this is Chert, a North American native Edwards Plateau Chert, specifically a type of Amoeba paternalis, and this is heat treated. This is a very light heat treat on it. Some of it doesn't need heat treated at all. Now I do have a video on heat treating rock as well, and I will link that down into the description. Not gonna lie, it's an old, really crappy video, and I'm obnoxious to listen to because I'm trying to be some sort of over spoken voice on the whole thing, and it sounds ridiculous, but the information's good, so stick with it. Like I said, it's an old video, but the information is good on what heat treating is and what heat treating does. Heat treating can take kind of some crummy rocks and turn them into good rocks sometimes, but not all the time. Okay, so then next on the list, we've got something kind of like a coastal plains chert, where you're going to look at it like this and say, okay, well, it breaks kind of clean, but you can see it's not super clean. It's got like tear marks. It's got these little inclusions all over it and fossils. So this is actually a raw piece. I could make it a little bit better with heat. But overall, this is a decent, maybe a medium grade type of rock. If you find this, it'll certainly knap. You can even see the patina difference you know, when this was probably exposed for quite a long time, you know, probably not a huge amount of time from when it broke off. And then this is what it looks like when it's a fresh break. So they do patina just even in a couple years. You'll get a difference in color and even texture, but it produces a relatively sharp edge. So that's something to look for, kind of a medium grade. But you can't always judge a book by its cover either, because you can pick say a rock up from the creek and it might look like this, right? And you'd say, well, that's not good rock. I can't do anything with that rock. It's all grainy, it's all crappy. But when you crack open, boom, probably one of the best rocks that you can ever knap in the world. And you know, English flint's very, very similar to that. Polish flint's French flint. So this is a type of Georgetown, which is again a part of Edwards Plateau, and it is phenomenal rock, but you would never know it to look at it from the outside. So another one to really consider. If you look at this, it is probably the worst looking rock ever that you could pick up and say, I could never knap this. This is why you have to go in the woods and you have to start breaking them. Now this is agatized coral. Your average creek rock that you find that's ugly like this, when you break it open, is not going to be pretty. But every now and then when you find the right place, boom. That's the stuff you're looking for. See how it went from crummy crap to immediately glassy and waxy, and this is raw. So if we do put a heat treat on this, the color will pop and it'll get slicker and even better. So that's one more thing to look for as well. This is found in South Central Florida, specifically Pasco County, getting harder and harder to come across because everything is private land. So then there's a ton of other rocks, like creek rocks and cobbles and stuff, that you're like, oh, well, I found stuff and it was rough on the outside. When I break it open, it'll be good, right? Absolutely not. If you break a rock open, this is what most of your creek cobbles and anything that you're going to find, most places, when you crack it open, it's going to look like that. And you'll say, can that heat treat out? Nope, absolutely not. That is we're not even in the same silica properties. So I get a ton of people, like, I can't even stress that enough, a ton of people that'll send me a rock like this and say, can I make an arrowhead out of this? You know, because it's already somewhat flat and thin and it's in the shape. Can I turn this into an arrowhead? Absolutely not, because when you break it open, it looks like this on the inside. That is a non-nappable type of rock. You can't use it no matter what kind of heat you put into it, short of melting it down into magma and maybe trying to figure out how to make obsidian. You can't do it. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so then you may even live in an area that's got phenomenal rock and you think, well, I just need to go up and pick out a piece of flint. So you can take a piece of Edwards Plateau flint that you think, or Chert, that you think should be really awesome, but then there's different grades of it as well. So then you pop it open and it looks like this. Let's get a real good up close. Look how trashy that is. So many inclusions, so many tear marks. Can it be used? You know, in a very worst case scenario, you can probably knock some usable flakes off this, heat treat them, and get by. But overall, that is not good knapping rock compared to that. You can tell the difference. This is what you're looking for. Now, it doesn't have to be that color. Again, this, you can tell the difference when you look at this. It's slick and waxy and beautiful, and this is trashy and grainy and full of little fractures and all kinds of stuff. That stuff's no good. And to touch just a little bit more on that, you could take some of the highest grade rock in the world, okay, and you can have stuff that is freeze fractured. So even though it is glassy and it is beautiful rock, right, it is so freeze fractured, pot lidded, and a mess that you will never be able to knap that, even though that it is just chock full of silica and it comes from a beautiful source. The fact is, it's so damaged from freeze cracking that it is unusable. It'll crumble when you hit it. And this is also what happens if you overheat rock. If you put too much heat to it in the heating process, it'll start developing these fractures that spiderweb all the way through it, and it'll completely ruin it. So the heat treating process is actually fairly dangerous within itself. There are then just a couple exceptions yet to the rule, because you can take a rock like this. This is agatized coral as well, and you can see how rough and trashy it is. But when we heat treat it, and this is not the norm, you normally can't find a rock that looks like this. So like say, where's that other one we picked up that looks like this? And say, can I heat treat that and it'll turn nice? No, this one will not do it. There are a few that will look like this, and then when you heat treat them, after you heat treat them, they still look like this until you break a piece off. Let's get the camera to focus, and you can see how it went from grainy. This one's easier. You can actually see the little coral polyps in here. Isn't that cool? The fossil, the polyp fossils. Super neat. It's a 1.5 million old coral. So this is what it looks like. See how gnarly that is? Say I can't do anything with it. And then you break it, and it's slick and clean. So heat treating can do wonders for a piece of rock if it's the right type of rock. All right, folks, so hopefully this answers a ton of your questions on what to look for different knapping rocks. One of the things you can do is if you say, what am I looking for in my own area? What kind of rock do we have? Instead of sending me a question or other people a question and saying, what kind of rock do we have in our area? What you should do is start looking around and even go to local museums and look for artifacts that they have that are from the region locally, and that will show you what the local rock looks like. Now, there are a couple little changes or little nuances for different areas, because what can happen is a rock, say Central Alabama's great example, the rock will be yellow in its natural form, but if it's heat treated, it'll turn red. Okay, so then what'll happen, you go to a museum that say has a whole bunch of woodland points, and they're all this like really red waxy look, and say, where can I find this? I can't find this stuff anywhere. The rock is actually a little grainier and it's yellow, but they learn to heat treat it, which makes it slick and red. So sometimes you just got to get on the ground, put boots on the ground, do some homework, really look around, talk to some geologists. They'll usually help you out and let you know if they found anything in the area that, is a high silica type of, chert, jasper, agate, that kind of thing. Again, a lot of states don't have good knapping rock. Some have a phenomenal amount of knapping rock. Some have really good honey holes of rock that nobody even knows that they are there. But you have to just get out and look for them. But again, don't pick stuff up that looks like this and completely disregard it, because on the inside it could look like this. But once you break it, if it looks like this, you're onto the right path, because how awesome it is. But this is a crappy piece. Look for one that looks like this, that's not freeze cracked. And a little trick to that is dig down underneath the ground. So the stuff you find at the surface has taken in water over a period of time, and then it freezes, the ice expands, and pops the rock and puts all those fractures. So if you dig down below that level, you might find stuff that has not actually frozen and popped. So that's another little trick for you. But all the stuff that looks like this, and you break it open and it still looks like this, don't use that stuff, okay? You can't use it. It doesn't really matter how much heat you put to it. If you've got something that you think could be good, like the agatized coral, and it's a little bit grainy, try the heat treating process. If it doesn't break smooth and clean, then chances are it's just never going to work for you. So thanks for following along. I hoped this helped you get to where you want to be in your own primitive adventures. And thanks for following along, and we'll catch you on our next adventure.